Centuries ago by our Earth time, a race of men on the far distant planet of Telos sought immortality. They perfected the art of cybernetics, the reproduction of machine functions in human beings. As bodies became old and diseased, they were replaced limb by limb with plastic and steel. Finally, even the human circulation and nervous system were recreated, and brains replaced by computers. The first Cybermen were born. Their metal limbs gave them the strength of 10 men, and their inbuilt respiratory system allowed them to live in the airless vacuum of space. They were immune to cold and heat, and immensely intelligent and resourceful. Their main impediment was one that only a flesh and blood man would have recognized. They had no heart, no emotions, no feelings. They lived in the inexorable laws of pure logic. Love, hate, anger, even fear were eliminated from their lives when the last flesh was replaced by plastic. They achieved their immortality at a terrible price. They became dehumanized monsters. And like human monsters down through all the ages of Earth, they became aware of their lack of love and feeling in their lives, and substituted another goal: power. Their large silver bodies became practically indestructible, and their ruthless drive was untempered by any consideration but basic logic. If the enemy was more powerful than you, you went away. If he could be defeated, you killed, imprisoned or enslaved. You were unswayed by pity or mercy. By the year 2070, they had become as known and feared in the galaxies as the Viking raiders of the 8th, 9th and 10th centuries. It was in that year that a raiding party from Telos directed its attention to a small blue planet in a remote solar system, the Earth. Every planet, they had learnt, had its vulnerable side. This one seemed technologically advanced and was well protected by missile bases which were capable of blowing a marauding spacecraft out of the sky. Finally, they probed out its Achilles heel. In this case, it proved to be a small, lifeless satellite reflecting the solar sun. There was even an Earth base there of some kind. Control of that base, armed with Cybermen weapons, could lead to the control of the Earth. They had no use for the small blue planet. When they had finished with it, stripped of its precious metals, destroyed any technology that might one day challenge their own supremacy in space, they could leave it shattered and lifeless. The only previous time a Cyberman spaceship had landed on the Earth, it had been humiliatingly defeated. So although revenge was not part of their mental makeup any more than the other emotions, the Earth people needed to be taught a lesson, or they might one day challenge the Cybermen Empire. The Cybermen circled the moon satellite in search of a well-hidden landing place. This time, they were going to take no chances. Earth people were too resourceful for that. Their conquest of the moon would have to be accomplished by stealth. Their small fleet of Cyberman spaceships landed on the moon at exactly 4:30 AM on October 15th in the year 2070. Nobody at the nearby lunar base or those manning sky probes at watching stations on the blue planet saw them. So effective were the Cybermen's screening devices. The huge silver monsters that had once been men had achieved their first objective.
Doctor Who. The Moon Base. The TARDIS was wildly out of control, spinning helplessly over and over, and throwing the hapless occupants from side to side across the cabin. Like a ship in a heavy sea, it would pause for a moment and seem to stabilise, giving the crew a moment to hold on to any convenient handle, grip or ledge, then plunge. The young Cockney sailor from East Ham had managed to brace himself between two side struts. His head was bleeding slightly from a cut, but otherwise he was in better shape than his companions Polly and Jamie. Jamie was probably the worst damaged of the three, though. With a Highlander's stoic indifference to pain, he had rolled himself up into a tight human tartan ball. His plaid was taking the brunt of the impact as he was rattled from side to side by the spaceship. Polly, her long legs thrashing around as she tried to find a foothold on the steeply angled deck, was making the most noise. "Gotcha!" Polly yelled to within a foot of Ben's arm when the next lurch came. It was doubtful whether Ben would have been injured at all if he had not been trying to anchor Polly at the same time. This time, he seemed to be succeeding. Or was the ship finally levelling out? Polly whimpered and clung to him. He tightened his grasp, but there was no doubt about it. The TARDIS was finally steadying down to a level course. Later, as the machine seemed to take on some frenzied life of its own, he withdrew slightly, held onto the control levers for support, and let the time vehicle have its head, intently studying the ever-changing lines of data on the readout screen before him. There was no doubt about it. The dizzying motion of the TARDIS had ceased. The roar of overworked motors, driven almost beyond endurance during the last few hectic minutes, was dying down. "We're coming down!" Ben's trained ear had caught the different inflections of the TARDIS mechanism. The slowly descending whine. "Let me go!" Polly freed herself from Ben's iron grip, which had tightened involuntarily. "Ben, please!" Ben looked at her and released his hold. She sat up almost crossly, yanking down her short skirt. "I'm a mass of bruises all over. What happened, Doctor?" The Doctor had finally moved. Still in an intense concentration like a chess player, he gently flicked over a row of switches. "Doctor!" Polly's voice had an edge to it. "Won't you at least talk to us?" Ben straightened and stood up a little painfully, his muscles aching from the strain. Jamie was finally uncoiled from his protective cocoon. "If it's always like this, you can leave me back at Culloden Field. I'd rather take me chances with the Redcoats." Jamie had just joined the Doctor's motley crew. In contrast to Polly and Ben, both from stable backgrounds in 1970s London, he was a haunted man, a refugee, not only from the British and Scottish soldiers searching his native Highland moors for survivors from the Culloden battlefield, but also from his age, 1745. He accepted each new wonder philosophically, relating it to his primitive world when he could, accepting it without question when he couldn't. Just a moment. The Doctor had reached into his capacious pockets and brought out his diary. He took out a pencil and began making notes from the figures on the computer readout screen in front of him. The others clustered around him, nervously waiting for a word. He remained utterly absorbed. "Don't you even care what happens to us?" Polly stamped her foot. "We've nearly been killed. We don't know where on Earth or space we are, and all you do is ignore us." She burst into tears. Suddenly the Doctor became aware of the others, snapped his diary shut, replaced it in his pocket, and became all contrition. Yes, of course, my dear. You're none of you hurt, are you?" "Nay, thanks to ye if we are." Jamie glowered at him. Ben, his service instincts aroused at this rudeness to the captain of the ship, hesitated. "Doc, we'd like to know what happened and where we are." "Ah, yes." The Doctor had been glancing anxiously at his three companions, looking for injuries or broken bones. Reassured, he nodded. "Of course. Good question." "First, what happened?" Polly turned round. Her tears had dried. "Interference." The Doctor began to explain, then stopped. Interference with what?" "The TARDIS motors, from some kind of force field. Very strong one by the feel of it." "I'll say." "Second question now, sir." Ben took over the questioning of the chronically vague and evasive Doctor. "Where are we?" The Doctor punched a button on the TARDIS control console, and a picture appeared on the monitor screen in front of them. It showed a brilliant expanse of arid, lifeless plain with foothills in the near distance. "Is it Mars? It must be." Polly's eyes were shining. "Doctor, you've actually done it, haven't you? You've landed the TARDIS exactly where you said you would. It's almost worth not being able to sit down for a week." "Where's Mars?" Jamie began. "I dinna kenna when yon place is. Is it near to Glasgow, maybe?" "Hold on," Ben cut in. "I ain't seen Mars, but that looks very like somewhere I have seen. On TV, lots of times." Polly's face began to fall. "Yes, I see what you mean. It does look like—" The Doctor was edging away, his diary out again, pretending to be absorbed in his calculations. "The moon!" Ben continued from Polly. "Yeah, it's the moon's surface, all right." They all turned towards the Doctor. "We're improving." Jamie was looking at the screen and shaking his head. "The moon? Nay, young canny be the moon. The moon's up in the sky." "Well," the Doctor finally put away his diary with a dissatisfied, puzzled air. "Let's get moving." The Doctor became thoughtful. "There's some danger present here." "What, Doctor?" "I don't know," he shrugged. "Not yet." "Then we can go, can't we?" The Doctor smiled. "I suppose you've earned some. What do you call it, Ben? Shore leave? We'll go out for half an hour, give the TARDIS time to cool down." "Hey!" Jamie's eyes were still fixed on the bright landscape shown on the screen. D'you think we'll meet the old man in the moon? You won't meet a dicky bird, mate, if you don't follow me and get some gear on. The TARDIS had landed on a long slope inside a huge crater. Behind them rose the high rim of the crater, like a series of small broken hills. Ahead of them, a long white plain stretched out to a black horizon. Had they landed on top of the crater rim, they would have seen an even more extraordinary sight. A fleet of Cybermen spaceships, long, sleek and black, like marine torpedoes with small swept black wings. They lay in a protective circle, their cyber weapons mounted like sharp snouts in the bows of the craft. Outside the TARDIS, only Polly was looking back at the ridge. She noticed the red glow gilding the topmost hill and pointed, "Look! Back there!" The Doctor was locking the TARDIS's door when Polly's words filtered through the intercom which was built into each helmet. He finished locking up and turned to follow her pointing arm. The glow had faded. The other two men had also turned, too late to catch it. "I didna see anything, Paul." Jamie tried to shake his head inside the space helmet. "What you see, Duchess?" Ben asked. "A great glow in the sky." "Probably your eyes getting used to the lunar light, eh, Doctor?" Ben looked slowly round at the Doctor, who had just joined them. "Possibly." The Doctor looked thoughtfully back over at the crater rim, but as usual did not reveal his thoughts to the others. "That's more interesting, Doc. What is it?" Ben pointed down the slope. As their eyes became accustomed to the white landscape, they were able to follow Ben's keen gaze to a low plastic dome, apparently embedded on the lunar surface. Inside, the shapes of other buildings and a long gun-like object were just visible. "A lunar base of some kind, I imagine," said the Doctor. "Lunar base? Do they have such things?" Polly said excitedly. "If, as I suspect, we've gone forward in time, there were certainly manned lunar bases by the 21st century, replied the Doctor. Ben took a leap that carried him 20 feet, but nosedived him into the thick lunar dust as he landed. The Doctor looked back at them. "Careful, one tear in those spacesuits and you'll suffocate. Now you try, Jamie." Giving his struggle to understand where they had touched down, Jamie took a great 30-feet leap that landed him right beside the waiting Doctor. He grounded with a rock scrambler's sense of balance. "Ugh, I like this." He leaned back and touched Ben, who had gingerly stood up. "You canna catch me." In 2 seconds, both of them were leaping down the slope, like goats with gigantic strides, chasing Polly and calling out to each other with the sheer physical pleasure of near weightlessness. 5 minutes later, still chasing each other and playing a moon version of tag, the three companions had almost reached the plastic dome. They could now see that it was an enormous size, like a gigantic upturned bowl. Suddenly, Jamie, easily the winner in this game of moon tag, leapt over a small rise in front of the dome and vanished from sight. Polly and Ben stopped, wobbling as they tried to keep their balance. "Where did he go?" Polly's face looked anxious. "There, in line with that gun, or whatever." Ben pointed to the side of the dome where the long gun-shaped object was visible through the clear plastic. When they looked down, they saw Jamie lying in a twisted position at the edge of the dome beside an entry port. He was lying very still, one leg doubled awkwardly under him. He had obviously overleapt the rise, crashed against the plastic dome, and had slid down into his present position in the moat. "Quick, we must get down to him," said Polly, but before either of them could move, the curved sliding door of the entry port slid open. 2 figures emerged, both in spacesuits, and expertly lifting the unconscious Scott, carried him inside. The port closed behind them. It was Polly who noticed the entry port glide soundlessly open. They hesitated for a moment, then, led by the Doctor, filed inside.